Hi everybody, I'm Dan. Now better known as Kanban Dan it would seem, but a name I have come to love whether I liked it or not when it was first given to me. Today we're going to talk about big Kanban, or at least that's what I thought the title was going to be, until I found out really that the title had to be
Scaling Kanban style. Kanban style. Scaling Kanban style.
the slides go downhill from here.
Kanban style. Scaling Kanban style.
Hopefully that sets the tone. All of the effort on that slide, seriously. Okay, but what are we going to talk about? I think that more often than not, when I've gone out coaching, Agile, Kanban, wherever, what I see are team-level implementations. Whether that's a Scrum implementation, which, by the way, keep this quiet. It's just an implementation of a Kanban system when it's done right. Shh, secret, don't tell anyone. But Kanban also, we tend to see team Kanban implementations. And I think we need to think about how we get to the next level. I've put some names of frameworks up there now. Let's get rid of the buzz. So Team Kanban is a proto-Kanban. It's not what Kanban really is going to give you the advantage in. You will get advantages by doing a Team Kanban, just like you will from personal Kanban. But what we really want is to get the big enterprise-wide advantage. That's what Kanban's always promised us. But has anyone ever been involved in an Agile implementation that wasn't actually an Agile transformation? Well, that's a problem, isn't it? Because we don't want to do that. We can do it without the transformation. Does that make sense? Does that sound like I'm over-promising? You be the judge. Homage to Pavel, is he in? I want to tell you a story. His stories tend to be more real. This one's a made-up story. I apologize for it, but I've done it anyway, because I want to keep it clean. Meet Sai. Anyone recognize that fella? Okay, cultural reference, that's just gone everyone's head, that's fine. He's a Kanban guy, and he is a service delivery manager for the team Alphanauts. Has anyone read David Anson's blogs about the emerging roles in Kanban? Well, meet a service delivery manager. One of the two emerging roles he talks about specifically. They're doing well, and they're starting to get noticed. Hopefully this is a familiar story to many people who've been involved with Kanban teams. They're starting to see some real benefits. So I've done the slides a bit for SlideShare so people can read them. Hopefully the talk over the top will make more sense. But the idea is that everyone in his team is pulling together in the same direction. And everyone wants to try and scale that out to the organization now. However, Sai's been told, because he knows from all of these Agile conferences and talks he's been to, that we need to have cross-functional teams. We need to have co-location. The biggest problem you've got until you fix co-location is going to be co-location. That's something I've said myself in the past. This talk is the alternative path to agility. This talks about how we can get there without those things. Dancorp is like many corporations we've heard of. I think you may remember Tony talking yesterday about the co-organization season. Try and tell Milo to go into co-location. Good luck. We're all over the world. I went to a bank recently, and I was asked to help work on a team. They did design in London, build in Singapore for front end, New York for back end, testing in Pune, and one guy in Lithuania, but nobody really knew what he was doing, but he was building the project. That's more than a lap of the world in a working day, just to get some work done in a team. And that seemed like, wow, we need to co-locate. So can we just move everybody around? Oh, that's kind of hard. Turns out we do have some designers in Pune in India, and where the devs are in Pune in India. Why don't we get them working together? Oh, they're in different parts of Pune. It's actually 4 hours drive between the buildings, and they're not allowed to work in each other's buildings for tax reasons. Wow. How do you get around that? The organization just isn't fit for co-location. To do that is going to be the biggest transformation the organization's ever had to go through. So how do we get around it? Well, the interconnected ecosystem of shared services. I'm sure you've heard David talk about that quite a lot. And I think it's one of those terms we need to go into. Let's get away from this cross-functional team and think about how the teams can Kaizen their way from this position where we've got lots of different shared service teams in lots of different places all over the place and get them working together. So Sai has decided he's going to leave the teams where they are. That's the best decision because it's the only decision he could make. And he's going to help the organization to manage the flow of value across that ecosystem. Or in other words, Sai's going to have to Kanban the shit out of it. Credit straight to 20th century folks from The Martian. So, the concept of multi-layered teams. So you've got teams, we know about dev teams, we work with them a lot, we coach them a lot, we make them really effective. But if you think about the next tier up, that's where Sai now has to work. It turns out that never mind the team is the unit of delivery, it turns out the team isn't even the unit of delivery in this organization. In order for one team to deliver something, especially a front-end team, they're going to need the framework team, they're going to need the back-end team, they're going to need the database team, they're going to need the server provisioning team. Everyone's got to get in a row just to get this thing delivered. So the team is no longer the unit of delivery. It's the whole organization, effectively, is the unit of delivery. But how often do we see this as true as well? Every team is individually motivated. They are locally optimized, if we're talking in lean language. They've looked for local sub-optimizations. How can I get the most value out of this team? Which means actually, how can I get the most work done by this team, rather than value delivered by the team? Does that make sense? Say yes, Dan. Yes. Thank you. God, this is the quietest talk. This is the most lectury talk I've ever given. I have huge imposter syndrome about this talk, I've got to say, because I'm usually much more interactive. So please be gentle, but do give me good feedback because I'd like to make it better. Thank you. So at DanCorp, no one's aligned. This is effectively the organization. We're trying to head in this direction, but all of these teams optimized for local efficiency, because efficiency is good, it saves money, and local benefit. A lot of the teams are heading in completely the wrong direction in terms of the organization goals, but that's just down to the policies that have been set for those teams. You work like this here. And they don't have sight of the organization goals. They don't care about the organization goals. I was working in an organization recently that had over 60,000 concurrent projects. Wow. That's just madness, right? No one can understand that. No one can make sense of that. No one knows about them all. Probably no one knows more than 10 or 20 programs. So actually working at that level is just mental. We have to try and get aligned to what this organization's trying to do. If we can do that, then surely we're going to hit the heights. DanCorp will be profitable and take over the world. I think I'm giving my plan away. So this is what Sai wants. He wants an aligned organization where everyone's swimming in the same direction. We're going with the current. We're all working in the same direction, and it becomes easier. Everyone's optimized towards organizational-wide benefit rather than local benefit towards the team. Everyone is effectively playing the same game. We're trying to do the same thing with the same goals. As you may have heard earlier, I'm a rugby coach as well as an agile coach, and I like to bring in a lot of what I've learned over there to over here. In rugby, every single team is kind of split in two. We have the big lads, the forwards, my boys, and we have the glory hunters in the backs, the ones who basically knock the ball on. No, that's not quite true. We all have to play together. So the forwards have a different body type typically, and they have different goals within the game of get the ball, secure the ball, get the ball, secure the ball. The backs are trying to do something like break down the opposition and actually score tries, invade the opposition territory. But if you train those two groups separately and don't have an overall plan of what you're trying to do as an entire team, it just looks a mess on the field. Trust me, I've seen it many times with my teams, my junior teams. So the idea is to try and have a contiguous, simple plan that we can all get behind and therefore do our own thing as part of the wider master plan. If you do that, then you win the Six Nations and the Grand Slam. If you don't do that, well, we'll not talk about the World Cup. That was just too painful for me. So, enter the service delivery manager. Si is a service delivery manager. And he suspected if he could be service delivery manager across the whole organization, or that whole value stream that he was responsible for now, then it would have flow of value across the entire thing, of actual value stream, if you like. Otherwise, what he found was we were spending a lot of calories, everyone was really busy, but all we got was heat. I don't know if you've seen that in organizations you're at. I've certainly seen the one I'm at right now. We're really, really busy, we're spending a lot of calories, but actually we haven't put anything live at all. So we're just making heat, and there's a lot of friction. If you've ever been around agile teams that aren't putting things into production right now, they probably won't complain about putting things into production, but they'll complain about so many other things. But once you get live, once you start getting those things that agile's meant to do done, then suddenly all the other noise tends to drop a little bit. The heat level drops. There's less friction going on. And I think it's really important that we do what we're meant to do, which is deliver value to the end customer, meet the end goal, especially if you're aligned around a great common goal already. I'm working on trying to reform the criminal justice system in the UK. We're trying to make it so that victims don't spend so long waiting to get the justice that they need, or that people who are falsely accused don't wait forever to get to trial and take a load of abuse, or witnesses spending years waiting to come to trial. These aren't things that we want to happen right now. We want to bring it down, make it quicker, get people who are obviously guilty pleading guilty early to keep out of the court system, take cases that should never come to court out of court. And as you can see, I'm quite passionate about this. Like, everybody in my organisation is really passionate about this. But we haven't managed to get one single guilty plea early yet because nothing's live. So there's a huge amount of friction, therefore huge amount of heat. But here's the big but. If we're no longer locally optimized, who decides who does what work? How do we schedule across the entire organization? Well, the good news is we have Si, who's scheduling, who's working with the teams on how we do things and making sure that we get rid of blockers, that we all talk to each other, and that we prioritize work correctly across the teams. But who's scheduling the work and saying this one or this one? Well, we need a service request manager. So we've got Si with the service request manager, Tim, and his boss, Trevor. Okay, nobody getting that one at all. Seriously, I put effort into that, but never mind. So, Si talked to Tim, and Tim says, I used to be a product owner, but I'm not really a product owner anymore. Now I focus on things like policies for risk assessment, scheduling, sequencing, and selecting work. That's what I'm now here to do, to make sure the team is always effectively delivering the right thing based on the risk to the organization, getting rid of that risk early, which has always been the promise of Agile and Kanban. Can't someone do that thing across Stancorp? Well, I've got this boss, Trevor. Let's have a chat with Trevor. So Trevor loved the idea. Of course he did. This is a wonderful story, right? It would have been terrible if he hadn't liked the idea and it all stopped there. But he loved the idea. And he volunteered to help as the service request manager. So, Trevor and Simon, you see? Now we get it. Trevor and Simon worked together and they just repurposed some existing meetings. Most organizations have loads of meetings. We don't have to add this huge raft of new meetings. We just work with the ones we already have. So we could focus on things like strategy, focus on how the operations are going, actually have an operations review, have a service delivery review, how are the end customers getting value? Have operations review again because I typed it twice. We could have a delivery planning session, and we could actually make sure that the delivery planning sessions for the individual teams had the priorities that Trevor and Simon wanted to get across the entire organization. I'm not describing radical change here. Hopefully that comes across. We're trying to say, let's take people who are already in the organization and shift their alignment. Let's take meetings we already hold and shift their focus to service delivery, and that we're all working to the same direction. So we get subtle changes. It's not revolutionary, it's evolutionary. It's evolving our current process. Whenever we teach Kanban, we start with the original principles. We say, start with what you do now, the service delivery principles. Start with what you do now. and evolve. Stick with current roles, responsibilities, and job titles. And absolutely, we just tweak things a little bit. Effectively, what we're asking is everyone in the organisation to just tilt their head a few degrees and squint a little bit and look at it as if we are delivering service to a customer rather than doing what the boss says or meeting that target so I get my bonus. And actually, if you remember what Chris was saying yesterday about actually getting those data and getting that to the people at HR who set those policies so that we change the policy so we're not trying to motivate people to work to the wrong localised benefits, but instead we motivate people to work to the organisational benefits. That's why small companies work well. Everyone gets the big picture because the big picture is quite small. And that's why it's really hard if you rock into a company of 140,000 to try and get everyone motivated together. It's a really big challenge because everyone's been working in a different way for so long and are so focused on smaller areas. So the team started replenishing their queues without looking at those local goals, but looking instead at the global goals. And Trevor and Simon made sure that the local SRMs and SDMs got everything they needed to understand what should come next. And instead, we focused on the service delivery. So was this answer all roses and daffodils? As in everything's coming up roses and daffodils. So quiet. Yes, it's a story. Of course it worked. It was perfect first time and everyone loved it. But the focus of how we know it was good, duration, lead time across the entire system dropped dramatically. So you see this in organizations where we've gone to organizational Kanban. Instead of thinking about just, hey, our lead time in our team is like 8 days rather than 25 days. We need to think about what the customer sees. How long is the duration of the whole thing? In my case, what I'm trying to do is behind the scenes, and if anyone's watching from the MOJ, I'd love that we actually looked at the end-to-end system of the criminal justice system, not just the bit I'm working on, and said, how can we view it from the perspective of a witness or a victim or family member of a victim across the entire piece? How can we make the whole service better rather than just this bit of it, which is where we currently are? But that steps in the right direction. Get that time to come down and things will be better. Value delivery rate increase. Well, we know Little's Law. Your average lead time is going to be your WIP over your delivery rate. So if you're using your WIP as your lever and your lead time does come down, then the angle on your CFD will get steeper, your delivery rate will increase, you'll get more things done. Your throughput and your quality will increase. We've seen this many times in stable systems, obviously. Defects dropped due to focus on quality at every stage. So because we're focusing on the quality, because we're in a Kanban system, that's the first thing we do is make sure the quality's right. Then defects across the entire piece will drop. Motivation will grow because everyone cares about the same thing. So we heard a lot about autonomy yesterday. Absolutely. Having the autonomy within a team to make things better, but to have the autonomy to make things better within the overall vision of the goal of the big thing. So it's not making things better for us, it's making things better for the customers of our system. Actually having that vision in mind when you're autonomously improving makes things much better. Of course, you've got to mention Dan Pink in one of these sessions. I'd be an absolute zombie if I didn't. I've forgotten what the other one was. Damn it. Bacon. Right. I don't know, I'm still tasting it from breakfast. Company performance improved at Danco, and it dominated its sector for years to come. Of course it did. But could it be real? Okay, that was a story. That's a little fable. I think it's worth having a vision of how simple it could be before we mix in the complexities of real-world organisations. I'm afraid I can't stand here in a lecture, which effectively this format, and tell you exactly how to solve all the problems you're going to face if you try and do this, because they're your problems, and Kanban is by necessity a descriptive method. So your problems are your problems, and you're going to have to come up with ways to fix them. That's actually why I love Kanban. I hate this idea of a prescriptive method that says, if you just do this, all your problems go away and it all gets better. It's like, really? Is it going to work here, where we're in a heavily regulated industry and we have the eye of the press upon us, just like every other industry? Well, of course not. You need to actually think harder. what Kanban's going to do is make the problems visible. What's the biggest problem when you're trying to do something across the entire piece and get rid of local optimization? What's the big problems in your organizations?
Communication.
Comms, absolutely. What's the biggest source of resistance to change in big organizations? Come on, it's not even after lunch yet, people.
Roles and responsibilities.
Partly. I would say.
Seat control.
Sorry?
Seat control.
Control. People want to keep control. And that's exactly a big part of it. It's politics. All organizations are political. Big organizations are very political. I think that's absolutely true. What does politics mean? Well, I think it was in Crucial Conversations, I was recently going through that again. They talked about politics as, actually it was 5 dysfunctions of a team. Politics is where you control the message you're giving depending on who you're talking to. So I'll say one thing to this bunch of people, but I'll say a different thing to that bunch of people because I don't want them to see things. It's where you do that wonderful RAG status report every week or fortnight or whatever, and it goes up to your boss and they tweak it a bit for the next one. By the time it gets 3 tiers up, everything's green, the horizon looks beautiful, and we're really wondering why we're not making the money we should be making as an organization because everything looks great. That's politics. And if we've got lots of local managers doing things, well, of course, that's going to be a problem. So we have to get beyond politics. My tool for getting beyond politics is really, really simple. If someone says something about politics to me, I talk about service delivery to the value of the customer. And they'll say something else political, and I'll talk about the value delivery across the service to the customer. And sooner or later, these are intelligent people, and they're going to say, hang on, the thing I'm saying sounds a bit stupid. He's talking about value delivery to the customer. It's really hard to fight that level of naivety. And I think naivety is what I'm talking about. Naively pushing forward and saying, we can do this for the benefit of our customers. Why can't we do this? We're so close. And being relentlessly positive that we can do it. If you can keep that, then you can break down those political boundaries. If you can find allies in those teams. What did I learn from my last gig? I learned from being a very big organization that if you are relentlessly positive and someone keeps saying no, try the next person. Try the next person. You'll find someone in that organization who can say yes. Make them your ally. Make them your advocate in that organization. Keep bringing those people in. Find your biggest dissenter. Make them your best friend. Make them show you where it's all wrong. Show them what you're doing. Be completely transparent. And let them knock it from the inside. And suddenly you've got someone who's now your best advocate. Your best advertising. These things are simple tools, but they work. If you go into a political organization and try and play politics, and unless you're very good at it indeed, you're going to get eaten by that organization culture. I'm not a cultural guru. I need to learn more about those sort of things. But I believe naivety and positivity can beat politics, even in an organization with capital P politics. And I'm trying to prove that right now. And I'll tell you how that goes next year, I guess. But I believe it really does work. And I've seen it work in organizations. Just being relentlessly positive. Talk about how we can do it, not why we can't do it. And we get there. So what do you need to change to get there in most organizations? I think that role is really important. And it's usually missing. We put middle managers in charge of teams, and then there's somebody else who gets all the funding so we can get everything done, usually a portfolio manager, a program manager, somebody like that. But no one's day to day across the entire piece, making sure that we deliver value across the entire piece. I absolutely believe having someone to do that is really important, giving them the empowerment to make things visible. Especially if you've got a big Kanban system of your entire system, you're going from one organization to the next. So, for example, where I am right now, we've got a delivery function, and then we have operational services who are in charge of all the production and production-like environments. And that's a big fence. And traditionally, you fill in a lot of documents, and you throw your stuff over the fence, and then they throw it back at you, and then there's lots of finger-pointing, politics, and so on. Eventually, something gets to go live. That's the traditional method of dealing with that. DevOps, obviously, if you've read the Phoenix project, you'll know this is an answer to that. Let's embrace It's not about this team and that team and throwing things. It's let's make one team. Let's bring those people with the knowledge and skills and trust and empowerment. Those are important things too, into the dev team. Let's bring devs along with us from there. So we're not arguing with each other. We are we, not us and them. Be relentlessly positive. Keep talking about how we can do this and keep talking about service delivery across the piece. If we can do that with that role, I truly believe that will make the biggest difference. Get someone in charge of what we do next. Prioritization and scheduling, understanding real risk. Those are the real impacts to the business. So you've got someone who cares about how we do it, making people talk to each other. Well, not making them, put them in the room so they enable their talk. What I tend to find, I don't know about you guys, is the best way to get things done is to put people together, then get out of their way and let it happen. And that's exactly what you need in that role. Let things happen together. This is about which things, which are the risky things, which are the things we want to get out quickly. How do we all choose that? And again, Tony Grout in the keynote yesterday was talking about actually giving a forced rank to all the work and saying, sorry, you're not getting your bonus this quarter because we're not doing your thing. Perhaps we need to change the bonus system in there, and certainly the hiring and firing policy in there, but actually understanding the forced ranking of what we want to do first. So we're not massively increasing our organizational WIP, our work in progress, by working on everything at once. The sooner we finish is the biggest lie I've ever heard in my life. The sooner you start, the sooner you've started, and now you've got something to worry about until it finishes. Let's finish things. What do we want to finish first? Working on the necessary evil to get there. Change. So we've appointed a Simon, we've appointed a Trevor. That was easy because we have them in the organization already. We just have to refocus them. Change some meetings. And then a bit of education across the piece. Show the teams how to Kanbanize their process. Show them the small tweaks they have to make because it is just descriptive. And then allow them to work on the right things for the right reasons rather than be busy with the wrong things to generate heat in the organization. Am I making this sound too simple? Perhaps there's a reason for that. It is simple in premise. Everything to do with Kanban is just basic common sense. And where you see these things that don't look like common sense, it's usually, when you think about it, it's just counterintuitive but common sense. Let's have everyone in the organization working together on the same thing, says Dan. Oh, but it's not that easy, says everyone. Politics gets in the way. Well, you can just ignore politics. Make sure that we all want to do the right thing. Keep talking about the customer. Keep talking about value of the overall thing, and politics drifts away. I do make it sound easy, and it is complex, but it's complex in different ways in different places. But if you keep to those rules, I truly believe there's no reason why we can't all do this. Measures. Measures, measures, measures. There are so many people talking metrics in this community. I think when you talk about Kanban, what we've noticed is there are so many other things that you have to talk about. You have to talk about thinking fast and slow and the Daniel Kahneman thing. By the way, there's a great video online I can point you at, save you reading the book. Horizon, how you really make decisions. It's an hour long, it's really good, and it's done with Kahneman, it's fantastic. So there's thinking fast and slow and that whole idea of psychology and social psychology. There's cognitive neuroscience. Why do you need 7 plus or minus 2 people in a team? There's systems thinking, the 95-5 rule. There's understanding people's motivation, the whole Dan Pink piece and those sort of things. We end up talking about this huge wealth of stuff that's really got nothing to do with Kanban, but it's kind of like the landscape. It's the trees and the hills and the fields that we're painting this beautiful church of Kanban in front of. If you don't have those things, if you don't understand them, then it really gets very hard. But it's a really simple message. Measures is one of them, and the no estimate thing. I was a big fan of no estimate, and then the no estimate thing on Twitter went mental, and people just decided to use it as an idea to, if we put no estimates hashtag in something, we can have a fight now. Let's fight. And I think the message of it's been lost in there. We should have good forecasts for delivery. How the hell else can we get those middle managers to be trusted by their senior managers if we don't tell them when things are going to finish? It just seems like common sense. Most organizations require that now. At the minute they're relying on people guessing. That doesn't sound like a very high hurdle to beat to me. And there are wonderful tools out there. Happy to talk about that for hours if you want to talk outside. But we need to improve our measurements to make sure that we are all aligned. I did hear someone once say, if you don't know why you're going to use a metric, don't measure that thing. I felt sort of sad at that moment because I think you should measure stuff in case you need it. Because at the point where you realize you needed that metric, you're like, now I haven't got any data. So I think only expose metrics when you know why you're exposing them. So what do we want to make visible? Oh, we want to build trust with the management. Okay. So I rocked up to a team very recently, real story this time, and we got working on the framework team for this platform we're building, and we got through 11 stories quite quickly. 11 stories is a magic number in no estimates. I can forecast now, and so I did. And I told our director that we would be finished with this section of work on the 24th of April. Today is the 19th of April, and we will finish this week. I told her that a month and a half ago, and it was right. And we've done something like 70-odd stories, 80-odd stories since then. The data does carry through. Forecasting works. Why did I tell her that right the way back then when it was kind of risky to do so? I needed credibility. I needed credibility to make some other changes. I needed trust. So I took a flyer. I said, I know this forecasting stuff works. I've done it before. I'll take that as my trust point, and I'll demonstrate that we can do what we said we can do. And that when I say something, it's because I've got some facts behind me, rather than I'm just guessing we can do that. And so that's what I did. It sounds a bit manipulative when I put it like that. Is anyone in here a coach? Hands up. Team level, organization level, manager? Yeah? So here's the good news, you're a manipulator. You're just doing it because people have asked you to do it. People have said, can you help me get better at something? Sure, I manipulate you to do that. But that's effectively what we do. We find ways to trick people into being better at being themselves. I truly believe that. And it was a comfortable place to get to start believing that. But I do believe that's what we do for a living. So yeah, I did manipulate that situation, but in order so that I could make some more meaningful changes. And I think measures really help me do that. So measuring the right things and exposing the right things at the right time are really important. What wouldn't have to change? The T-shirt says, don't change, evolve. You don't have to change where people work. You don't have to do that co-locational thing where we change the entire organization structure. We don't have to transform, in other words. We just have to evolve. Because transformation is quite a brutal thing when you think about it. Would you ever go up to an individual as a coach and say to them, right, I need to transform your personality now? That's a scary thing, right? And to an organization, of course you're going to get a huge amount of resistance to a transformation. You always will. I've been doing it like this for 25 years and been safe in my job, and now suddenly my job doesn't exist anymore because of you lot. Cheers. Okay, now you're open for change then? That's good. So by not transforming, we can evolve our organizations to do these things better, to become agile, rather than stop doing what we used to do and start being agile. Become agile. 95% of everything stays the same in terms of job titles, roles and responsibilities, skills of the people. I've asked us to tweak a couple of management roles with their focus. Not get rid of them, not fundamentally completely change them, but change their focus. So you've got people who care about the whole service for each service that we do. Perhaps another tier of someone who cares across the entire thing, and so on. You can have a multi-tiered system depending on the size of your organization. You just keep tiering up. Tiering up means something different, doesn't it? Oops. But you see what I'm saying. All of that can stay the same. You don't have to make anyone redundant here. I mean, you can, but the idea is if you're a super productive, hyper-productive organization, if you're doing cost to benefit and they're roughly 1-to-1, you're probably in the wrong market sector. Hopefully your cost to benefit ratio is 10-to-1 or higher. So if you're fixing the benefit side, this whole thing about reducing costs becomes a bit less important, doesn't it? if you're making £10 here for every pound you spend, you're not worried if it's 99p or 80p anymore, because suddenly we're making £20 over here. So we can change our profit figures and less worry about that. Again, maybe I don't have the economics background in that to say that, but it seems that's kind of common sense to me. If you make a lot more, then spending a little bit more makes a good deal, right? Okay, I'm not an idiot. Good. It's subtle changes and easy to implement without a complete reorg. I say easy, I've probably used the wrong word. Straightforward, simple. Those are words that would probably fit better. It may be hard. People think simple and hard are opposites, and they probably are, but complex and simple aren't opposites, I don't think. I've got that wrong. Let's put that. Simple is not the opposite of complex. Simple is the opposite of hard. So simple things, there isn't a huge amount of complexity to it. It's quite straightforward, but there might be a lot of effort involved. I might have to expend a lot of calories in something simple. Running a marathon isn't complex. You just got to keep running for 26 miles. But it's hard, right? I certainly couldn't do it. Doing what Eddie Izzard did with was it 27 marathons in the heat of South Africa? I certainly couldn't do that. I know I can't do that. It's too hard, but it's not complex problem to solve. That's what I'm saying. This isn't a complex problem. It's a straightforward problem that just needs effort to do. And that's why I think we hear the term, an alternative path to agility. We all want the organization to be more agile. We want to be able to be aligned, like I said, with the slide with the arrows. We all want to be heading in the same direction. I think we all get that. We all want to have that great overarching vision. Within the next decade, we will put man on the moon. You know, that's a great thing to be working towards if you're cleaning the toilets in Houston. But actually, I don't think we have that a lot in the organizations. We forget the overarching plans of our organizations, and we just do what our boss says quite a lot. I've seen that a lot. We are locally optimized. So actually just switching this and saying, let's not local optimize, let's optimize to the goals of the organization. To do what we do with a different goal in mind, and therefore we all suddenly care about the same sort of things. And suddenly local politics doesn't matter as much as it used to, because our motivation center is now in the organization goal rather than the local goal. So where can we go for more on this? Obviously, this sort of image from the LKU site kind of says everything I've said in the last 40 odd minutes. If you're feeling some friction with your agile transformation, you might want to change to a less resistant path, or one that's more in tune with what the organization actually wants. So you're not actually fighting people to put something in, you're working with them and just tweaking things. Let's say, twist your head 10 degrees and squint, and it's the same organization, just viewed slightly differently. If you want to know about training on this, this is a very, very, very quick flyby of the KMP level 2 class, effectively. So it's thinking about the sort of things that we need at Kanban Management Professional Certification level. So if you want to learn more about the KMP 1 or KMP 2 level training, please do talk to Janice outside from the LKU, or talk to there are many AKT trainers in the room and in the organisation. Hands up, AKTs? Yeah. Obviously, if you want the best class, talk to Helen and me, but I would say that because I'm speaking, right? And also, I assume that given lots of people are in London, most of you from around here-ish, we have the largest active Kanban community in the world right here in London. It meets monthly. It's called the Kanban Coaching Exchange. I run it with Helen, and we get some great speakers in, but we also have the opportunity to talk and have free pizza and do all those kind of wonderful things. So you can just find your expanded social network in the Kanban community regularly in between conferences. Find us on meetup.com, or again, just have a chat with us and we'll point you in the right direction. There's, I think, over 1,000 members, which is mental. I don't think I've seen about 700 of them, but about 60 to 100 people meet monthly, I think, pretty much regularly. I got a cat in. You see the cat? What you can't quite see behind the cat is a big bacon sandwich. I thank you. Any questions? Actually, it's a zombie cat with bacon sandwich. Any questions?
How would the Kanbans actually work though? Are you talking about having nested Kanbans or
Yeah.
a sort of overarching Kanban that service manager would manage?
No, absolutely, both of those things. Yeah, so the idea of a team, to Kanbanize a team, all you've got to do is make it visible, start limiting work in progress, start measuring a few things that make it simple, like your lead time, while allowing them autonomy. I often talk about giving teams a common API, because when you're in dev teams, that kind of makes sense to them. We don't need to have standardization of how our teams work. We don't need to force them down a mandated path of prescribed work. We just have to share a few common measures and some common goals, and then we'll suddenly be aligned. So that works much better for me, and I think it fits much more with the team's autonomy. And then you need the next tier up. How do we know where we're doing? Can we summarize the boards below? If there are 10 boards at that lower level, perhaps they're just columns on a board, single columns on a higher level board with queues, and then start measuring some of the flow metrics across there. And if that's a program board, why can't that roll up into a departmental or organizational level board? Absolutely. The way I always see a Kanban visualization board is it should allow decisions at the level it's at. And maybe if you're a service delivery manager, you look at the higher level board and the team board, that's for your team. If you're the service delivery manager at the next level up, then you look at this one, the one below and the one above, and you actually stay at the level where you can make decisions. The whole point of that visualization isn't so everyone knows what's going on, it's so everyone knows what's going on so they can make informed decisions about doing the right thing. If you don't have that end-to-end visualization of what's going on at an appropriate level, then how the hell can anyone make a decision and know if we're doing the right thing, know if we are aligned to what the top level needs are? So I worked at UView TV. Is Chris in the room? Okay. Chris Young's talking later. He brought me in at UView back in the day, and we had a Kanban board, which is all at one level, the story level, if you like. I think there were like 10,000 cards on the wall. It was well over 30 meters long, and that's where I learned the dysfunction of, if you put the blue tack in the very center of the card rather than the top middle, you can stack them into leaves on top of each other and get more in the same space. Because that's a good idea, right? The space is effectively a whip limit, but we've just blown it by coming up with a trick to get more cards in. So we had huge amounts of visibility about what was going on, but if you stood next to the chairman or one of the senior members and they just came and looked at it and go, "Can somebody get me a Gantt chart? I have no idea what's going on." With just lots of work, and every card's, how much? £7,000 per card? And how many cards? Christ, we've got lots of liability. There was no way to make a decision on that about, well, that first release is going well, that wasn't visible. The story was visible. If you could somehow magically link those stories in your brain, you'd know exactly what was going on, but there was no way to do that. So actually having a next level up summary board would have really been useful for them. Where's the last ticket in that feature? Where's the last ticket in that user journey? So I know when that's going to come and get delivered. So actually having those nested systems with the board and the visualization enabling decisions rather than just showing stuff, I think is really important. Is that kind of an answer to that question?
Yes, yeah, it is. You're saying that you do it the way I thought you would have to do it.
But yeah, nested visualizations and keep nesting it all the way up.
I suppose, but I'm just thinking though, the service manager, wouldn't he be concerned with the top level as opposed to the bottom level, or would he be the service manager for all of the lower level Kanbans as well?
So a service delivery manager, it's not a required role, it's an emerging role that we've seen. There is some sort of need for somebody who helps these teams deliver, help them do what they do. The servant leadership role. In Scrum, you've got a Scrum Master because all Scrum teams are the same. They're all out of the book. The Scrum Guide tells you exactly how to set up. Kanban, well, you've probably got some sort of need for servant leadership. Certainly initially, perhaps not so much going on later. And so that you need something. So the role we've called it that because Flow Master sounds like a toilet. Let's face it. And there's no place for that in Kanban. But you can't help but talk about plumbing when you get into Flow, and it's not a safe place. But so steering away from that, yeah, you need some sort of way of describing that role. And service delivery managers, the term that we've come up with in the community, don't get fixated on the words. Think about it and say what it means. I always describe the MVP problem. Do you all know what I mean by the MVP problem? Have you got it in your organisation? So an MVP, as described by Eric Rice, is exactly one crank of the build, measure, learn handle. So there, I've built something, I've measured, I've learned. That's an MVP. That's just enough to satisfy that one turn. But it also means minimum viable product. And those words actually mean something to people. And often it isn't one crank of the handle. It's what's the minimum scope I can go live on our big service with on a big bang. I was like, well, I can't argue that minimum viable product sounds exactly like that thing you just said. But that's not an MVP. Not what Eric Rice called one, it means startup. They're completely different. So the words mean, it's the same words, the same letters, but they have a completely different meaning. So if we get hung up on service delivery manager, it has to be across the entire service. Yeah, I think servant leader at the right level. Again, for every board, perhaps there's an SEM, if necessary, in your context. Again, this is why Kanban works better with coaching, because without being in your organisation, it's very hard to generically say, take this model and apply it without being already prescriptive. And we know that prescriptive isn't part of what Kanban is. We don't want to be prescriptive. We want to try and say, here's the general idea of what it is. This should make your problems visible. Now think about how to solve your problems. We've seen a common pattern that we need these service delivery manager, servant leader type people at sort of each board level. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily what you mean, but it's certainly a good experiment for you to try. And it's certainly a low cost one because you probably have a manager in that role already. So let's let them do what they do with a slightly different focus. Does that make sense? Yeah, I've learned to be very cautious of words because they're loaded with both semantics and syntax. Okay, got a couple of minutes. Any more questions, or do you just want to look at the Gangnam Style cat?
I have a question.
Oh, one at the front, sorry, if I can come back to you in a moment.
I'll say you've probably got a manager in that role already.
Yes.
And they can then be the service delivery manager, which would be responsible end to end. What do you do when the organisational structure already has some other responsibilities assigned to people which conflicts with that end to end?
Okay. So the question is, what if you need an end-to-end service delivery manager for a service or a product, and they've already got different people assigned with, it sounds like political investment in different aspects of that role.
An operations,
and obviously the dev lead, yeah.
The customer representatives, and when you start talking about end-to-end value, they get upset because they feel that their responsibilities are fragmented.
So again, it's effectively political local optimization is what we're talking about, and it's not easy. It's simple but not easy. It's simple. You need someone who cares end to end about the service delivery to the customer because that's what the organisation's for. That's where the value is. That's where the money is, or if you're in the criminal justice system, that's where you make the system better. It's for the benefit of the consumers of the service.
So do you believe that in the end that by having an end-to-end focus that will win out?
I think you need to. I think someone has to do that. And it's not about getting people to preserve their roles, it's about getting people to understand that local optimization isn't what they're there for. I don't know about you guys, when you were promoted to manager, and certainly when I was promoted to manager, nobody sat down and said, these are your rights and these are your responsibilities. They said, go on then, knock yourself out. And in the meantime, they'd put out a job advert for my job. True story, this one. I'd stepped up from dev to delivery manager, team manager, and they'd put out a job advert the same day, and I was stupid enough not to look online and notice that this has happened. Till 2 months later, my boss said, you're doing really good at this job, so we've taken the job advert down for your job. I'm like, what? Hang on a minute, guys, seriously? But yeah, it turns out that's what organisations kind of do. So if you're in that role, who's told you that you need to just be caring about your bit? Who's the chief executive officer is not cascading a message down to every middle manager saying, you need to do your bit well and ignore every other part of this organisation and just optimise your local bit. I cannot imagine an organisation where that happens. I think they probably want you to do the best you can to make this organisation better. And I suspect if you have that conversation with the person who's locally optimising and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could all be locally we could all do this? Not you could be, But if we were all lined up like this and if we all worked together, wouldn't our service be great and wouldn't it be fantastic? It'd be really hard to get them to argue with that. I've been given the stop sign, which means I'm now depriving you of lunch, which is kind of an important event. So I know there are a few more questions. Please feel free to grab me. If you think I'm an idiot, please tell me that. If you've got feedback on the presentation, tell me that. Or if you've got a hug, give me that. Thank you.